We're on.
Okay. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Board of Selectmen meeting for January 18th, 2018 at 7:30 p.m. Could everybody stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Opening comments, Mr. Taylor.
Thank you. Condolences to the Beneke family for losing one of theirs, and condolence to a loss, especially I was very, very close with Richie Baldini. They're going through a tough time now, which obviously they would. That's enough. Thank you.
And my condolences also to Stephen Beneke. He was had family roots in Nahant, and Richie. I grew up with Richie. I went to school with him. I went to school with Linda. And I still can't believe it that he's passed. Linda and Michael and Jen and Jeffrey. We feel terrible, and our condolences go out to them. Thank you. Okay. Opening comments. We just went through that. Approve the and release prior minutes.
Is it possible that we wait for Richie for these?
Yeah, I think we should.
Next meeting?
I think we should.
Since
because,
the summer executive session once, and one he was at, I wasn't.
Right.
So it would.
So we can release them at the next meeting. And by the way, Mr. Lombard won't be with us tonight. He's a little under the weather, so we'll just move on. I'm going to switch it up a little bit. We have the annual audit. Matt Hunt is here from...
Powers and Sullivan.
Huh?
Powers and Sullivan.
Yeah,
Powers and Sullivan.
Yeah, Powers and Sullivan. Okay.
Clifton Larson Allen.
All right. So we'll get him out of the way quick because he's...
And plus, this is the most...
The whole notebook.
It's the most exciting part of the night.
Right.
We all know that. So we'll get into it, and obviously as I go along, feel free to ask questions. You've had a chance to take a look at the reports, so please feel free to interject as I go along. But as we always like to do, is to try to take these audit reports that contain a lot of information and try to condense it down to the parts that we feel are the most important pieces to point out. So getting right into it, really two reports that we want to talk about, financial statements and management letter. So we'll jump right in to the financial statements. I'll also try to give page number references on the financials as I go along and give some of these numbers. So if I neglect to do that, please let me know. But basically what I'd like to focus on first is if you look at your governmental funds balance sheet, which is on pages 15 through 16, in particular focusing on your general fund balance. Looking at the fund balance at the end of the year, it was a little under $2 million. And we'll get into some of the components of it. You'll see on page 15, you'll see that fund balance is broken down into various components, so I'll go over those a little bit. Part of your fund balance is considered to be committed for $634,000. That mainly consists of amounts that were set aside to help fund the FY18 budget. The assigned amount of about $112,000, that represents encumbrances, budgetary amounts from FY17 being carried forward into FY18. So that leaves what we call unassigned fund balance of about $1.2 million. Just for frame of reference, your general stabilization fund balance is included in that number, and that's about $100,000 of the balance. So in terms of your unassigned fund balance, I know that bond rating agencies really take a look at that number, and one of the things they do is sort of compare that number to your expenses and your revenues, just to get an idea of how that unassigned fund balance compares to your annual expenses and revenues. So that ratio for this year is about 10%, which is very healthy. And as a measure of comparison in the prior year, that ratio was a little under 8%. So the general fund had a strong performance in FY17. And you'll see that on both pages 17 and 18, which is your revenue and expense statement. And you'll also see that as well on pages 61 and 62, which is your general fund budget to actual statement. So I'd like to just clue in on that statement for a little bit, page 61, 62. I feel like this statement really gives you a good window into the general fund's performance for the year. And one thing that I always the number I always take a look at is if you look at sort of 3 rows from the bottom, it says net change in fund balance. And then if you look at your final budget column and you look at that net change in fund balance number, it's a negative 779,547. So what that means is that if you took a snapshot right there, what that basically means is that in order for the budget to balance, the town needed to use $780,000 worth of reserves, both amounts from the prior year as well as free cash, overlay, etc. So then in terms of the general fund actual performance, if you look at that page 62 and you look at that same line, net change in fund balance, you'll see that the actual net change in fund balance is a positive $245,000. So we went from a budget needing to be balanced by $780,000 to reserves to a net change of a positive $245,000. The reasons for that is if you look at that variance column on page 62 and you'll see the performance compared to your budget, you'll see that revenues came in higher than budget by about $754,000, and then your expenses came in lower than budget by $251,000. So the town did a really good job of conservative spending, and revenues coming in a little bit higher than anticipated. That's why that general fund balance was able to get up to that 10% level. A couple other funds, sort of circling back a little bit more towards pages 15 through 18. You'll see some other funds listed have their own separate column. Those are considered to be other major funds for the town, either because the balances are a certain level or also because the fund has some level of importance. So if you look at your CPA fund, talk a little bit about that. That actually, take a look at your revenue and expense statement on page 17. You'll see that you collected surcharges of a little over $200,000, received amounts from the state of about $94,000, and then expenses for the year are about $270,000. Talk a little bit about your water sewer enterprise fund, which you can get information on the enterprise fund on pages 21 through 23 of the report. Total net position at the end of the year, or quote-unquote fund balance at the end of the year for water sewer enterprise was about $4.7 million. You'll see that there's that fund balance amount, net position amount is broken down into invested in capital assets and unrestricted. You'll see that that negative unrestricted net position in water sewer is caused by the fact that you have that $1 million short-term note that's outstanding at the end of the year. I believe you had some water repairs, some emergency repairs that needed to be done. So that's why you see that negative number. So I assume once that note gets paid off, that'll flush itself out, and that balance will go back to a positive number.
Is that under fund net position?
Yeah, exactly.
700 and...
Yeah, you see there's about a negative $834,000
Okay.
in unrestricted. And I just wanted to point that out because that's usually not the case, that number is a deficit, and the only reason is because of that one-time occurrence of that short-term note. In terms of your rubbish enterprise fund, page 21, you'll see the total net assets in the rubbish enterprise fund is about $136,000, mostly considered to be unrestricted. And revenue and expense activity on page 22 is pretty consistent with the previous year as well. So those are really, we think, that sort of the highlights of the actual financial statements themselves. Then when you get into the notes to the financial statements, there's a couple of notes that we want to point out. Note 9 on starting on page 45 gives you information on the town's outstanding long-term debt. Outstanding long-term debt at the end of the year in total was a little over $4 million, about $3 million related to governmental activities and a little over $1 million related to water sewer. Note 10 relates to OPEB on pages 47 through 51. We've been through OPEB now for a few years. The OPEB liability is going to be a little bit different next year with some new accounting standards. But for now, you'll see a summary on pages 47 through 51. Really, the highlight is that table within that note that sort of summarizes the overall OPEB balance. And at the end of the year, the town had an OPEB liability of about $1.6 million. As a frame of reference, the town's OPEB liability is actually very small in comparison to other communities that might be of similar size. And then lastly on the footnotes, note number 15, starting on page 53, gives you some information related to the town's participation in the Essex Regional Retirement System. As you may recall, a couple years ago, the accounting standards came out with a pronouncement that requires us to actually report a liability on the town's financial statements for your share of the Essex Regional Retirement System. So you'll see information about that on that particular footnote. And as a frame of reference, that liability is a little over $8 million at the end of the year. So again, a pretty large document, about a 50-page report there, 60-page report. Feel like those are sort of the highlights that we wanted to point out in the financial statements. So before I move on to the management letter, does anybody have any specific questions as it relates to the financials?
See? What is your feeling about the Coast Guard Houses Fund?
That fund has actually been around for a while, and the only reason why that fund shows up as its own column is because it has a pretty large note payable balance of about $1.9 million. But there's really been no activity in that fund for quite a while, but because that note payable is still sitting out there, we have to report it as a major fund. Once that short-term note gets converted into long-term debt, then that particular column will no longer show up in the financials.
So they're taking the rentals to pay off the interest payment of $30,000 a year. The rest goes to the general budget. Do you have any, do you have an opinion on why it hasn't been paid down?
What, the particular note payable balance?
$1.866 million.
Well, that's not necessarily something that would necessarily be part of the scope of the audit. That's basically something as it relates to the town's financing in terms of converting that short-term note into long-term debt. That's how that note will eventually be paid down, I assume. I don't know if the town has other plans to pay down that note payable, but typically speaking, they're paid down through the issuance of long-term debt. But in this particular case, I don't know if the town has different plans for
So
paying
Matt,
it
what
down.
you're saying is it's basically a local financial policy.
Correct.
Yeah, exactly. So
Correct.
It was set back when Mark Collinen was town administrator, and so it stayed consistent all the way through. And it's something we can continue to talk about because that comes up every fiscal cycle is a discussion with the Finance Committee.
Mike Manning had always, and I agreed with him, motioned that we pay down principal. We're paying, right, and people should know this, that we're paying interest only on a loan, a $1.8 million loan.
1.866 million.
I missed a couple of numbers.
I memorized it.
And again, I feel as though that's going to turn around and bite us. So we should be paying some of the principal down and not balancing our budget with the rental income. And that all coincides with all the other stuff that we've talked about in the past, that if we sell them, the taxes won't achieve as much revenue as the rental would. So rental, what do we get, 102?
120?
It's about 100. Well, it's about 180 when you look at the.
If you were to sell them outright, you'd have half of that. So we need to, but also it becomes a liability.
But you do get rid of the $30,000 a year interest, too. So.
Right. So it's almost a wash. I think it's almost a wash. So
Seems like.
But we need to talk about that, and we have a committee that's supposed to be.
Right. Right. Oh no, these are questions I'd want to ask the committee too, if they're aware of, which I'm sure they are.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
But really, in that case, it really comes down to
But
fiscal policy, and that's not something we generally opine on because, it's up to the towns and cities' discretion as to how to deal with these types of situations. From an audit standpoint, we don't find it to be a risk. Obviously, it's something you're paying interest on it. Eventually, it needs to be dealt with. But in terms of those types of things, we let the towns and cities decide how they want to deal with those types of things.
And I'm sure you would have brought it up if it were an issue.
Yeah, if it were some sort of an audit risk or something like that, or
It's been 10 years that we've owed this money, so.
Yeah, and it's it's one of those things where, again, it's 6 to 1 half. If you could go different directions, like you said, it might be a wash if you decided to do something else. So really, it's just a sort of a town policy decision.
Thank you.
Okay. And then as far as the management letter goes, assuming no other comments on the financials, the management letter is really roll forwards of some comments from the previous year. And just sort of as a frame of reference, in terms of these comments having been there, these comments that are in the management letter are comments that we have in other management letters in other communities that also take quite a while for these things to resolve themselves. when you're talking about financial policies and procedures, risk assessment, disaster recovery, those are all items that are really big ticket, long-term items that really take a while to fully complete. So really, as you go through the manager letter, you'll see that really the comments are pretty consistent with the previous year, and you'll see from the management responses as to where the status is with all those. So again, we don't feel like any of these are necessarily major risks, otherwise we'd report them as significant deficiencies and material weaknesses, but we do recommend that the town continue to make movement towards these items that you see here in the management letter. So that's really it from our end.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Any more questions, Steve?
Nope. Thank you.
Thank you.
You have to vote to accept the report?
Somewhere around page 1, right?
Accept, to be or not to
I
be.
move that the Board of Selectmen vote to accept the audit report for year ending June 30th, 2017, as presented by Clifton Larson Allen LLP.
Okay, I'll second that. For discussion? Discussion?
No.
Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries.
Thank you, Matt.
Good night now. Okay, so we get that out of the way. That's good, the audit report. I just want to make one note that we had a petition from Nahant Market for a malt beer and wine license, and they've retracted it, so that is off the agenda, and they've pulled back on that, so there will be no beer and wine license down there. Okay, so we can put that aside. Now, I want to go to the Citizens Forum. Anybody? Yeah. That's you. Why don't you can actually come up here if you want, Christine. This is Christine Licio.
Johnson Licio, but that's okay.
It's much easier so we can hear you.
Yeah, so I was going to send you this letter, but I thought that I would come up and talk with you about it, and I've talked a little bit with Dennis before the meeting, so some of this might actually be a little bit tweaked in terms of where we need to go with it. But this is the letter I'm going to give each one of you. I also have some photographs that I'd like to go through, but if I could read the letter first. Sure. Into the record, and then you can go through the photos with me. So the January 4th, 2018 coastal storm was a damaging and flooding event to many Nahant residents, especially those who live in the Willow Road and Lowlands neighborhoods. Properties and homes were flooded, resulting in significant loss and damage. During the storm, as it often does, the town of Nahant pumped water back into the ocean along Willow Road, and there was no pumping done in the Lowlands neighborhood except by the residents themselves. The repaired storm drains on Fox Hill Road, thank you, Dennis, they did help to divert some of the seawater to the drainage ditches. However, the drainage ditches quickly filled and caused the water to remain in the water table, and as a result, in Lowlands residents' basements and properties. Although some attempts by the town have been made to clean the debris from the ditches, to date many remain narrow and clogged with growth and debris. In addition to these obstacles, the ditches themselves provide a very long, over 2,000 feet, and sometimes uphill. In fact, there are 3 places on the ditch map where the water reverses direction and has to go uphill. Path to Bear Pond on the golf course. Even if all of the ditches were cleared of debris and water, the water will not flow uphill to a place that is already full of water. And to date, the water remains, or it was at least when I wrote this letter, in the golf course. Bear Pond was still flooded and the golf course was flooded. So the water is just not effectively moving from the lowlands uphill all that distance and to the golf course. During the recent storm, we were somewhat fortunate that there had only been one tide that caused flooding to the lowlands. In other storms, successive high tides have resulted in even more damaging flooding. I think it was the no-name storm. We had 3 damaging tides, and so, we had much more devastation. So we were fortunate this time. Included in this letter are photos that show the blocked ditches, the current ditch water levels, the compost area of the dump, and the flooded golf course, all taken on January 14th. On the flood map of Nahant, the compost area is shown as a flood zone, which allows waters to wash out from Short Beach. Over the years, the compost area has been raised so high above the original grade and the surrounding lowlands neighborhood that floodwaters have no other path than to flow back into the lowlands neighborhood, further placing all Nahant residents at risk. During the storm, many of the lowlands neighbors during this most recent storm, called the police and fire departments for assistance, and they did assist. There was at least one medical call to the neighborhood as a result of the storm. In 1978, a resident on Fox Hill Road died as a result of flooding, and a house burned to the ground. If the intersection of Castle Road and Nahant Road closes due to flooding, emergency equipment cannot get into or out of town. This is a town-wide safety concern, not just a concern for lowlands residents. Ultimately, the goal of protecting life and property is a concern to all of Nahant. Clearly, there needs to be a better solution for removing water from the lowlands neighborhood than waiting for the golf course to drain or hoping that it will flow uphill through obstacles to reach the other side of Nahant. And at one time, there was a connection between our storm drains, which were repaired partially this year, to go across Castle Road and out back into Lynn Harbor. And a house was built at one point and blocked off and that drainage. So that drain is not working. That's why we're now forced to send water to the other side of town. There was an article proposed and supported by the FinCom last year for town meeting to improve drainage to the lowlands and help divert water from the neighborhood. We ask that the Nahant Board of Selectmen and the town administrator place this article once again on the town warrant for 2018 town meeting with an amendment that would specifically help pump waters from the lowlands before we have another real crisis. We know that the town is facing many financial stresses. However, the flooding in Nahant's lowlands is predicted to only get worse with climate change. We have weathered many storms. We have lost life and property in the process. We ask you to please help us protect life and property for all of Nahant's residents by resubmitting the following article written by DPW Director Dennis Ball and fully supported by the FinCom in time for the April 2018 town meeting. And this was signed by 13 residents. A couple were in Florida. We didn't get to them. But this is the letter, and there's some photos I'd go through with you. I did have this stamped by Peggy because I was hoping to get it in your packet tonight, but
No, I didn't.
I got here late.
Thanks. No, I know.
So if you go to the so there are the names of 13 residents, and I know, we could put in our own article with the number of residents, but we would really prefer that the town support this effort to show how important it is that we protect life and property in the lowlands and in every neighborhood. If you go to the pictures, past the text and the signatures, you'll see that's the pump that's used on Willow Road. I hear we had some troubles getting it going, but it did eventually work. But we need something like that in the lowlands neighborhood as well. Castle Road did close on January 4th due to flooding, and so emergency vehicles can't get back and forth in that area. And like I said, if Nahant closes as well, Nahant and Castle, it really separates the whole island. There's a picture of my neighbor's house, the water rushing through from Castle Road to Dave Walsh's house there, and Castle Road. This was myself and a neighbor pumping my backyard this weekend, 10 days after the storm. The water is still in our neighborhood because it just has nowhere to go. And, we know the water may come, but the longer it sits, the more damage it does to property. It's not healthy to have water that's been washed across roads and properties and God knows what else, and full of bacteria also sitting in your house or in your backyard. This is the sequence of the drainage ditches, and I started on Ward Road and kind of went along, but you can see that they are full, and when they're full, they can't accept more water. And this was not, as bad as it could have been. And this was a full week after the storm. There's debris. This one here, the culvert's full, and where it goes under by the pumping station, the water was literally to the top of the culvert. So, if there was more water, there's just nowhere for it to go. Some of the paths are blocked with things that have fallen in or growth. There's one ditch there that comes from behind the pump house area where it's completely overgrown. It's hard to tell. That one looks mostly like vegetation. Many of the places it starts out wide and then it gets very narrow, so it fills with water, but then it just doesn't seem to go anywhere. And there's also a picture of the compost area. Though it is a flood zone on the map and it should be pretty much at level with the rest of the floodplain, it's got to be a good 25 feet above my head. It's been filled in and it is causing water to back up into the neighborhood because it can't go in that direction. It can't go over the hill. This is the only culvert I could find following the path, and it goes under Flash Road. It's a very small culvert to take all that water and then divert it to Bear Pond. It's really small. And then if you go to the bottom of the page, there's another culvert that opens up into the golf course, and again, it's blocked with vegetation. Dennis just told me that's on the docket to be done. But if you get to the golf course picture, which is the last one, you can see that a full week after the storm, it's full of water. So water, once it hits its level, is not going to accept more water. So it's just not a viable solution for the lowlands neighborhood. Dennis has, since he didn't know I was coming here tonight, so, but he told me that some of the things on the agenda to do for this $175,000 were done. But the things that I've added in red letters, you can see, would be the installation of a pump for the lowlands, and that hasn't been done, and connecting that culvert or the storm drain that would go out back into Lynn Harbor and make it a much shorter run for the water, I think would be something maybe we could tweak the article. But
the house isn't actually on top of the pipe. It's broken.
okay.
And it's plugged at the end on Doggy Beach. You can't even see the outfall.
Right. So that perhaps, this I can rewrite and resubmit so that, the things that are done we don't have to do again, but that we could connect up that pipe so that we can pump out the neighborhood, because it makes sense we're having more flooding in the properties because that hasn't been working for some time.
I was down there. It was scary. I mean, I went down and because Marcia Duvall had called me, and I was up to my waist in water.
Yeah.
I feel it's terrible. I mean, we got to do something. Obviously, the drains out. Let me ask you this, Dennis. Did the pumps? Did the pumps at Bear Pond? Were they working? Or are they working now?
There were two pumps. One was taken out of service. The remaining pump is functioning. During the storm, we got that pump functioning because it was frozen. The outfall pipe actually was frozen as well. That was our difficulty.
Right.
We brought in some portable pumps to mitigate that. Those pumps had been running continuously for almost 5 days after the storm to dewater the island. But the point A to point B solution to Miss Johnson Lucio's concern is the restoration of that outfall pipe across Castle Road. We did have an opportunity this past summer to camera that area.
Yeah.
We fixed some of the catch basins on the lower end of Fox Hill Road. Those pipes were collapsed.
Yeah.
They were fixed. We got a camera into that outfall pipe that we're speaking of. We only could get so far because of the way it's built.
Yeah.
We didn't see any indication that it had a tremendous amount of degradation to it. So the issue is, one, after speaking with Sheila Hamilton, we confirmed that easement still exists. The pipe still exists in some form. It's a matter of finding the actual outfall, because somebody did build a wall over it, blocked it, so we'd have to re-establish that. But that's the easy solution.
Can we put a pump in there in the catch basins? In the dry well or the grate, whatever you want to call it.
Well, you could probably put some sort of basin in the ditch area.
Just to get ahead of it, so that you can actually pump the well.
But
Because they're almost below sea level there.
Right. So to Christine's point, I mean, we were between a rock and a hard place. We had an ultra high tide. The tide did not turn as quickly as they normally do. It just sat there. So there was really no place to put the water either on Wilson Road or Cass Road. That was the twix that we were in. Ultimately, when we were able to move water, it moved.
Yeah.
But it took days.
Dennis, could you give an update on the mosquito control efforts, and then also the capital plan and the fact that the funding that was being discussed is actually in there?
Right. So as part of the mitigation, mosquito, we were joint ventured with Northeast Mosquito Control folks.
Exactly.
They've already some mitigation or ditch cleaning on Ward Road portion of it, and a couple of culverts within the path. The next element of this will happen on the 6th fairway. That's going to be happening in the next 2 weeks. It's probably about 1,000 feet of drainage on the ditch mitigation.
And they had to wait until this winter so that when they were in there doing the work, they didn't do damage to the
Well, correct.
golf course area.
Right, we're working on the frost at this
Yeah.
point. That's what we're waiting for. Otherwise, it would be just a muck.
Yeah.
Wouldn't have any traction. It would cost a tremendous amount of money to do so. So that is in process. You'll see machinery down there hopefully in the next couple of weeks. We're waiting for some DEP documents. We had to file. There's going to be a little bit of not waste is a proper word, but
Debris.
Dredge material.
dredge. We have to dewater, so we had to specify some locations. It's probably about 100 yards of cubic yards of material that we'll ultimately end up with. Yeah, well, it has to be dried out first.
Oh, Christine, excuse me, Christine, tell the people down there that I advocated for that. Dave Walsh can remember. I think that we're the only two that started out by pushing. Back when my dad was around 108 years ago, they used to have it flow into Lynn Harbor. And I've been pushing and pushing and pushing for it and gotten nowhere because you're disrupting everything.
Well, let's
I'd
get
like to
somewhere
see it
now.
done the right
I'm
way.
about getting somewhere.
Even if we even if we have to dig across the road and make our own little pipe across the road, it's worth it.
Because I think Dennis said there's a pipe that goes across the road and then it stops. So we just need to open it up.
The pipe was there a year and a half ago too, is what I'm saying. It should be done.
So
Yeah.
my
It's time.
Is it submersibles, like I said, can you put a submersible in one of those basins that,
we could do a lot of things.
to pump that stuff out? I mean,
We could do a lot of things.
because it literally, I watched it, I was down there. and
Right.
I saw a car that was
But,
floating in the water.
but gentlemen, to pump it out, you're pumping it to a place that is overflow with water, is what Christine was saying. I walked by there was
No, I mean,
water everywhere.
I know, I mean, I'm
To
talking about.
pump it into Lynn Harbor.
Yeah, that's
Oh,
what I
wouldn't
mean.
that be nice?
Yeah, well, that's where the outfall.
That's
That's where the
where we
outfall
should
is.
go,
All
in
right.
that
But again,
direction.
we can put all the bells, whistles, we can build pumps, we can build Skylab. If the tide's the tide, the water is not gonna go anywhere. It's gonna sit in its collection point until Mother Nature lets it relieve itself.
True, but we're over a week out and the golf course is still flooded.
Well, you see-
And it could accept water at this
Right
point.
on.
The tides are low enough at this point that
it
you
is.
could be pumping. So
So there's two things happening from a geological standpoint. One is that you have probably about 8 inches of frost that's there now, right? So there is no water penetration through the soil into the ditches. Everything's laying on top. We've had not sub-zero, but freezing temperatures over the last week. What you're seeing is giving kind of like a false positive, all right? There is water there, but it's ice,
right.
okay?
But there was literally water in neighbors' yards when it wasn't ice this weekend, when
Right.
it was melting, and before it froze, it was still full of water.
So the question I have for you is, we had a tremendous amount of rain. over
And
the last couple
but
weeks.
see, all of that seawater that came in froze, and then it melted.
Right.
So it was still seawater.
Christine, a big part of what you were asking for is the reinstatement of that funding that was taken out last year.
Yes.
It is in the capital plan. We have a very aggressive capital plan this
Okay.
year, and it's all within that funding. What you'll see is that I'll have a discussion a little later on about the budget, the proposed FY 2019 budget. And we have about $4 million worth of sewer and water maintenance repairs, and in there is that funding.
Okay,
Because with that-
specifically for the lowlands, like,
Yes.
Because what it does is it protects our facilities, the
Yeah.
Ward Road facility being primary.
absolutely.
Yeah, so we have it in there for that purpose.
We also added the additional equipment, portable equipment that we
Okay.
need as well. Again, that's up to the taxpayer
Right.
to fund.
What about going through FEMA? I understand that they put aside a certain amount of funding, of their funding for mitigation purposes. Have we applied for grants for any of this through FEMA to see if they could help?
We apply routinely for grants. As a matter of fact, we're very aggressive and successful. But you really have to take what they give you, and a lot of it isn't directly applicable to this.
Okay.
But we do. We get a lot of FEMA, MEMA grants, and we've been doing very well with those.
All right. And the reason it's not applicable for this, because you would think if the claims went down because people were putting in fewer claims if they had less damage, it would be something they would support?
Well, it's interesting in grant programs, it's kind of like social engineering. What they do is they want you to accomplish something, so they give you carrots to get you to where they want you to go.
Right.
And so this being a long-term kind of chronic problem, they're looking to address some of the big issues like seawalls, break points in the protection of the lowland areas.
Right. Which is another matter for
I
another
wonder if we
day.
could put a breakwater up there. But that's because
I
that's
mean,
where you're getting all your water. It's coming from Castle
It's
Road.
coming from a couple of points on
Right.
Castle
I know
Road.
exactly where it's coming
Yep,
from.
yep.
And getting back to FEMA, you're right. I just wanted to let everybody know that we actually got into the community rating system. It's been 2.5 years, and I finally convinced them to put us into it. We mitigated the problems that we had, and we're in it now. We're going to have a June 11th meeting with the ISO, the insurance people, and FEMA. So people are going to see their flood rates drop again once we get the percentages off. And I do want to talk to them about a grant or some kind of money, because they want to know how much. There's a lot of questions, and I'm going to be talking to you, Dennis, pretty soon, and Jeff, about open space and drainage and all that, because they want to know all this stuff. So I think it's important that we talk to them and see if there is something they can do, especially these guys, because that's what they do, and that's all they do. So
That would be great.
right.
And just one other thing in terms of the compost area, is there a plan or anything in the budget proposed for lowering the grade and bringing it down to what it is, which is a floodplain?
And I can attest to that. I mean, I own a piece of property, and I don't have flood insurance because my garage is paid for, but it has been raised, and
Yeah.
it's got to stop because it's a bowl. In '78, behind my garage is full of water. It would be almost impossible now because it's blocked off, and all the people on Bylaw, it's pushing it the other way. And we really shouldn't be doing that. We should really take care of that area.
Yeah,
I'm happy to share a flood map with you to show you, it is really supposed to be a wash area for Short Beach.
Well, DEP's the one that gave the town the permits, and I don't
Right.
know why, but they did.
And, I get that, and, but I guess, does it have to be a permanent storage? Should we be taking and, recycling, but then getting it out of the area again, so that we're bringing it down to a level that's manageable, because it's very, very high right now.
Yeah, well, the administrator actually did a good job getting rid of a lot. There was an awful lot in there. And I think, how many cubic yards did you pull out of there?
Oh, that actually was done before I was here, and I can't give you the number, but we spent over $200,000 in hauling that out there, and it's very expensive to do so. Dennis is still trying to do a controlled burn, which would get rid of a lot of the organic material. I know, exactly. And then we are also, we have funding that we use to haul material out. And so this is on a weekly discussion that we have.
Isn't that like $10,000 a year? Is that-
$10,000 a year.
Right, so maybe we need to look at that amount, because it seems $10,000 isn't scratching it. We're bringing in so much more than we're taking out, that maybe we need to look at that figure.
So we need to do more for that area. And the other part of it is, the other part of the equation is, they're going to want to know how many repetitive claims we have, from FEMA. And that will be almost a detriment to us. So we need to correct that. We can't have repetitive claims. I mean, people, and I understand you have to, because
I know
you're
many
getting wiped
neighbors
out.
who don't claim. They just pay the insurance and suck it up, because their rates are going to go up anyway, so they just don't claim, even though they lose.
Well, they should. That's what it's there for. And,
So
their rates are going to go down, because
that would be good news. But mainly it's the water concern. It's not, it is just a safety and health concern. And
So we're happy to say at this point that the capital plan does contain the funding in there. And so what we
do
can
I need to do anything
Well, what
specifically?
I'll do is Dennis or I will be in touch with you, and I'll give you a copy of the capital plan.
Okay.
And I'll highlight where that is. And it's just really kind of a monitoring and making sure that somehow through discussion it doesn't pop off.
Yeah, we got to keep it in there.
And, last year the decision was made for financial purposes, but this year I don't think that'll be the same case, because we understand the emergency need for this funding.
Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Christine.
Chief, did you have any questions? Any more? Okay. Okay. While I have Dennis here, we can, want to do the Worf update?
Sure.
Quick
Dennis,
update?
Dennis, you want to give us a quick update?
All right, thanks for your time tonight with respect to the, giving me the opportunity to give an update on the WAF. It's been a little bit of time since the general public has had any information with respect to the WAF in a public forum. So just let me give you a quick project history, just to bring people up to speed. 2016, the town applied for a Seaport Economic Council grant for the purposes of requiring funds for the repair, the restoration of the WAF. There was a grant awarded in the amount of $410,000. It is structured as a reimbursement grant. We have to spend the money to get the money back. The project was engineered. Child's Engineering is the engineer of record. Was placed out to bid. Unified Construction of Everett, Massachusetts was the apparent low bidder. Their bid came in at $576,000. The next bidder was in excess of $900,000. The balance of the project funding, the delta between the contract amount and what was actually the grant award, was funded by CPC funds, right, to the tune of about $166,000. Contract was signed November 11th, 2016, with a substantial completion date of April 1st, 2017. Due to the wall restoration was complete. That work was completed. Due to fabrication lead times with an essential project component, which was the powder-coated sheet piling, it became very, very apparent that the contracted substantial completion date, the original substantial completion date, was not going to be met. To retain our Seaport grant, the contract was extended with a remobilization of December 1st of this year, or December 7th of 2017, with a new substantial completion date of April 15th of 2018. On December 1st of this year, or excuse me, I'm still in 2017. 2017, Unified Construction took custody of the property. Just thank you to the Harbor Master, Robbie Thibault, as well as the Lobstermen for their cooperation to get the project back on its feet. I do need to make one statement. If the general public has any technical questions regarding the project, the Board of Selectmen nor the town administrator would necessarily have that information, okay? They would have generic information relative to dates, but if the general public has technical questions with respect to the way this thing's being built, those answers come out of my office, all right? Knock on my door, call my phone, I'll show you the plans, they're available. There's a lot of, the sole source of information relative to schedules or technical information is derived out of my office, and no other social media outlets, okay? So I'm more than happy to answer people's questions.
So in that sense, I overheard or heard up here that it would be done by December 29th, starting December 1st.
No, there's no way that would have been done December 29th. That's 3 weeks in the middle of Christmas. So anyways, so that being said, good.
I would not make that up.
No,
And it was, so that type of discussion has to go through Dennis.
see the light? All right.
No, I'm with you.
This is where it stops, right here.
I sat here and said, how could it possibly be done by December 29th?
No, it's not going to happen, all right? So I just implore
So-
people that have questions right here.
So do we have a completion date?
Yes, we have a completion date. We have a contracted completion date of April 15th of 2018. However, we're pushing for April 1st of 2018.
Good.
All right? Contractors are back on site. In fact, they're there tonight, working. They're working with the tides, with the weather. So they're not working with traditional work hours. So at 7 o'clock in the morning, and you're peeping with your binoculars, and they're not there, they may not be there because the tide is such that's not going to allow them to get the work done that's scheduled for that particular day.
But I don't peep, I drive down to make
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. That's okay. We have a lot of
Thanks.
sidewalk engineers. We're good. We're good.
I'm
All right,
good, too.
so-
You can certainly understand, though, why,
No, understood.
Absolutely.
But
what happened last year.
No, absolutely. And I, believe me, I've been in the business a long time. You get that tweak in your gut. You know when things are awry. The project was off kilter. I'm not even saying the word kilter. When they were back on site in December, just before Christmas, they were driving some sheet piling for the purposes of building the cofferdam, all right, that allows that area to be dewatered, okay? They were not they hit refusal at a too shallow of a depth, all right, for their comfort level. We went back to the engineers, got a resolution. They're satisfied with their means and methods. They changed their means and methods to get to our goal of getting a complete ramp. I'm satisfied with that. The engineers are satisfied with that, and get them on their way. All right. We, as a customer, okay, do not have any control on the daily activity down there. That's not our business. Our business is making sure that when April 1st rolls around, that we have a functional dock. A functional facility.
Did you realize that last year, a week before it was supposed to be done, I was told that it was going to be done on.
That couldn't have been done because the red flags went up very soon.
I have all the emails, Dennis.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
and I don't want to argue about it. I'm not going to argue about it. I don't trust them. I don't.
Today, as we sit, what's today's date?
Today is January 18th.
18th. Okay. As we speak at 8:15. All right. I'm very confident. All right. that we're going to get that job done. I will know.
That's all I need to know.
I will know, and you will know. As soon as I know, you'll know.
Okay.
Hence the update. This
Hence.
is very important for the town because they do ask us all the
Of
questions.
course. But like I said, T, they ask you technical questions, schedules,
No,
days.
they
but
ask-
it would-
They ask what's going on, where is everyone?
right, they're not necessarily going to be there every day.
Now let me know.
They're not going to be there every day.
We understand that.
And they have been very good at giving me a heads up on a daily basis when they're going to be there, when they're not going to be there. Again, today, specifically, they weren't there all day. They pulled up at 5 o'clock this afternoon because the tide was running out, and they gave them an opportunity to drive their piles tonight. They're working under candlelight right now.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
That's fine. As long as-
Which, to that point, I guess we have to also ask for the consideration of those who live in the general area.
Yes, thank you.
We greatly appreciate your patience and tolerance with this, but as Dennis aptly pointed out, is that we have to work with the tides. And so, we appreciate your patience. Please call us if it becomes too much of a nuisance, and we'll see what we can do.
No, absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely.
All right.
Good?
Thanks, Dennis. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you, Dennis.
Okay, next on the agenda is the Fire Station Assessment Committee, ongoing review and discussion. Mr. Walsh, Mr. Fulton.
Dave, it's good to see you back from Florida.
Yes, I flew back this afternoon just so I wouldn't miss this flight.
You're a dedicated chairman.
Okay. What do you have to report to us, Boris? Oh, thanks.
I'm sure you got to read the email that I sent you about probably 2.5 weeks ago, which was basically a summary of our meeting that we had back on December 6th, and which it broke down exactly why we need the 2 articles, one for the temporary temporary building for the fire engine when it arrives in November, and a second for the work that needs to be done to bring the station up to snuff and be able to handle the engine when it arrives. So basically, if you've read it, I can answer questions that you have on that, so that it's probably easier for me to do that than just recapitulate everything that we've talked about.
That's what I got. Mr. Taylor, questions?
On the $300,000 article that you're proposing, I'd like to see it written a little different, if I could just propose it to you.
That's fine.
Vote to appropriate $300,000 or any other sum of money for engineering and design services for the expansion, renovation, or construction of a new code-compliant fire station, is what it now reads. You've asked to put $3 million into renovating the existing and expanding, which is great. So I figured by putting in the word construction, it doesn't fit well with me, and I thought that we could write for the expansion and code compliant renovation of the existing fire station. I think that makes more sense to me. Maybe I'm out in left field, but as soon as I say you want to renovate, but yet you're putting the word construction in there, you might get some people saying, whoa, because you have me saying, whoa.
The only thing I would caution on that is what the article is intended to do is cast an umbrella, and then when the motion comes in, that goes down to the specifics. So this is intended to keep options open until you get to the motion, and then when we get to the motion, it'll say specifically renovation. And that's the traditional approach, so that you don't end up finding yourself boxed out of what your preferred option is when you put the motion together. So you can see it says or construction. It offers expansion, renovation, or construction.
But we don't want construction, we want renovation.
But if you're looking at it
Are
from
we going to confuse the public?
Well, if you're looking at it from a bonding perspective, you just want to make sure you keep your options open for classification on bonding, financing, all of that. So I can see what you're saying, and I think through the conversations we can continue to focus them on that. That's not the option, but the preferred option for purposes of keeping our options
The lingo.
open.
For
The lingo,
warrant.
exactly.
Okay.
That's a good way of putting it.
Okay.
Well, the only, I have to agree with T, because, let me just say this. We've gotten into this, we've been going down this road for 2.5 years now. The original intent of this committee was to have a fire station assessment. And that turned into taking school property, which, by the way, I noticed that you mentioned in here that one of us knocked
Shut
it
it
down.
down.
That's correct.
I don't believe so.
Yes.
I don't believe so. One person can't do that.
Ask your
Doesn't
partner
matter.
to your right.
One person can't do that, Dave, okay?
Well, it did happen.
Doesn't matter. One person can't do it.
Whatever,
Okay, what about the
whatever you
school-
want to say.
What about the school committee?
What about the school committee?
Did they have any say in it? Did they want to have their land taken by the school superintendent?
No.
Okay, so we'll leave it at that. You didn't have to put that in, you didn't have to put that in your letter. One person didn't take that away from you, okay? This was a fire station assessment.
That's
Which turned
correct.
into a DPW building, public safety building for $17 million. We have a sewer problem breathing down our throats, correct?
That's correct.
So you're talking about spending another $300,000 for this, $75,000 for this, when this should have been taken care of probably 2 years ago with a fire assessment. That was the original intent of Mr. Antrim and the town administrator to have a fire station assessment. I don't know how it got to this, because it's 2.5 years later, and we have nothing. And we have to build, now we have to come up with a plan to have a temporary storage building which in my opinion will look like hell. And it's, to me, you're gonna heat it, which is gonna interfere with the green community, things that we're working very hard on, by the way. And I don't think it should have gotten to this point, my opinion. And one person didn't shoot it down. So you should correct yourself on that.
So Dave, your request is
Your
that,
opinion.
your request is that these two articles be placed in the warrant
Correct.
for continued consideration, and they be put into substantially this form. And what that allows for is, if it is placed in the warrant and kept there, the selectmen and the finance committee can continue to review and can do anything up to even passing over or indefinite postponement. So if you were to allow these to continue in as they're, substantially worded, it just keeps your options open.
It keeps your options open, but I think Mr. Taylor hit the nail on the head, because what you're gonna have is people get up at town meeting, why aren't we constructing a big public safety building? And where are we supposed to get that money? I mean, I just don't understand how, because you have one day, 6 hours, 7 hours to come in and spend a ton of money, $10 million. And half of that goes to the school, and the other half, I mean, we're borrowed to the limit. We're gonna be borrowing more money for the sewer, okay? And now you're talking about an engineering study, or whatever, and that Dore Whittier plan is gone. It's completely gone, out the window, because it was it turned into a fire assessment turned into a public safety building. And that's still a sore subject with me, because it shouldn't have gotten that far. We should be, and I agree with Mr. Taylor, it should be the engineering and design services for renovation of the existing fire station. That's the way it should be, to house what we have there. Because if you continue on this path, you're gonna have people get, well, why, why are we building a new DPW building and a police station and all this? It's gonna get out of control, and they're not gonna get what they want.
Well, the
So
whole,
I
the whole
suggest you
purpose
change
of
the
what we're
article.
doing is getting those parts out of it and doing something of renovating and expanding the building that's there. If we didn't do this and we were building, say we were building up at the school, on the school property,
Yep.
we'd be talking a project that's more than twice this amount of money. So we are trying to do it
Exactly,
for the,
and you weren't gonna get the school property because they weren't gonna release it.
so that's
Okay.
why we've done what we've done.
All right, so,
We're trying to work so that we can get articles in front of town so they can vote on whether they want to do
and
this.
you're coming up with a $3 million price tag for an expansion of a fire station,
Expansion and renovation.
$3 million bucks. Okay. Do you want to see the article written different? If you do, then by all means,
Between now and by the time we accept everything, yes.
yeah, okay, that's what we'll do.
That's a very good point. We have about a month to really kind of finalize the details.
Yeah, I mean, I reviewed this a lot, I spent a lot of time on this, just trying to, and I thank you for the work you did. This is a great job. Something needs to be done. I understand that, but we've been before this town meeting before. They look for things to go anti, sometimes. So, I mean, it needs to be reworked, in my opinion. But move it forward.
Okay,
I
so
think you need to have a specific plan to bring to town meeting.
So from my perspective, when the committee uses the word construction, that's in the context of renovating and dealing with the existing structure, which has proven by multiple assessments to be inadequate. It's by no means the only inadequate physical infrastructure of the town, okay? You talk about the water, you talk about the sewer, we talk about the wharf, but it is also a need. So this committee's effort was meant to kind of distill that down. It's not to gratuitously spend $3 million or whatever amount of money it ends up being,
I understand
but
that.
to recognize the need and to try to address the need.
But you do realize when you write an article like this, you're gonna have the police up here and the DPW wanting, and then it's gonna wind up right back where it was 2 years ago with a $17 million public
No,
safety facility.
I don't think, well, we as in you, and we as in citizens and members of, this committee can't let that happen. And one of the things that can help us is to have a clear understanding from you guys about what your vision and longer-term plan are for the high-level capital needs for the town. Obviously the water and sewer infrastructure are what's at the top of the list now.
Right.
But just looking at that now, because that's what's right in front of us, is kind of just perpetuating the same cycle, purely reactionary. So if we have clear thought, insight, and projection into the future, and see that a new fire station makes sense, and it's well reasoned and thought out, then it should be able to be defended, and it should be defended to the police, to the DPW.
A fire station.
A fire station, exactly.
And that's it.
Correct.
Okay.
I should note that the selectmen also asked that a DPW facility and a police facility be placed on the capital plan, so they are in there. And I do speak with the police and DPW on a regular basis about this, and so they're very attuned to what's happening, and then the kind of order in which these buildings will be taken. And we all kind of understand that the debt schedule is a debt schedule. We will never be at a point where we'll have no debt. So we just keep working the debt schedule to keep it comfortable within our tax limitations. So right now we have all three buildings in the capital plan.
Board of Selectmen asked you to do that?
Yes.
Richie Lombard asked him.
I don't remember it. Okay, Mr. Feinberg, Chief Feinberg, I'm sorry.
I just want to clarify one thing. You keep referring back to the prior assessment that was done. This is not another assessment. This is a critical component of moving forward into the construction phase of the renovations. In order to go out for bid for construction, we need architectural and engineered plans, and that's what this funding would provide for us. So I just want to make sure that you're clear on the distinction between having another assessment of what we have and what we need versus what it is that we're actually asking for.
I totally understand that.
Okay.
I just think that the assessment was a waste of money. That's just my opinion. It was a waste of, and time. Simple.
I can't speak to
And
that.
I'm
That
not afraid to
assessment,
tell you that.
right, that assessment was completed before I started here, so I can't speak to that. I can only go with the results of it.
The original grant was given to Austin and Mark to do a fire station assessment, not a public safety, take school property assessment. That's just not how it was set up. And unfortunately, now we're at where we're at. You got a brand new engine coming that he got, and we have nowhere to put it.
Right.
We have nowhere to put the other engine. So,
My opinion on that, because it was my first year here, my opinion on that was there was a two-part assessment that cost $15,000. The first part was well done, and it explained all the deficiencies and things that needed to come up to code for the fire station. Someone made a decision to do a Part B on different site locations, and that's where the multifaceted $16 million building came up. And it went from a fire station into an uproar, because I heard about it.
So looking forward, we have two articles that we all agree will be kept on the warrant, and the committee will continue with your work and do PR leading up to the town meeting? Is that correct?
and you
Absolutely.
and you have to remember, meeting code, the building's it's not gonna meet code the way it is. We understand that. But that's what we have a building inspector for. We don't need a consultant to do that. We have a building inspector that knows this stuff. He's supposed to know this stuff, and he does. So, I would say consult with him. Talk to Wayne. See where you are with it. See what you need to do. And see if you need to be up to code, because I don't see us spending $4 million. I just don't. Or $3 or $4 million I just don't. That's just my opinion as a taxpayer. So.
Those numbers that were developed by the group were purely educated guesses, all right? By people that are in the business. that understand prevailing wage, understand the wage rates, understand the construction costs. That's where that number was developed from. There were certain assumptions based upon what we know today, okay, and that's how that was developed. Can that be scaled back? Possibly, but we don't know that until we have a defined plan and specifications that somebody can actually put a pen
I
to
don't think
paper.
you should put a price tag on anything, because it's scary. I think what you need to do is come up with a plan, what you want to do, and that's it. And talk to the building inspector. He's the professional. He gets paid for that, and find out what the code is and what you need to do.
So we're
The FEMA stuff, it's in
Right.
an A zone. I'm going to explain this once again, and this will be the last time. It's in an A zone, and you have garage doors. Water goes in, water goes out. It's a non-factor. That is a non-factor, okay? You can build in an A zone. They don't have to be on stilts. You don't have to put breakwaters up. It can be absolutely built there. The garage doors act, and this is one of the sticking points before, that it was in an A zone, the big flood zone, oh my God. Doesn't work that way, okay? It's not how it works. If you want, I'll bring FEMA in. They'll tell you.
There's no need for that.
Okay. I can't hear you. If you want to speak, come on up here.
But to your point, very, very quickly, with respect to code, and we're talking semantics here,
Yeah.
anyone who builds a building or renovates a building
Yeah.
is compelled to meet the building code if we're renovating
That's
beyond
right. That's right.
specific percentage of that building.
That's why we have a building inspector.
Correct.
We don't need a consultant.
It's the same
We actually do need a consultant, but that's beside the point. We have two articles here now that we think are moving forward, and I think we can actually take that and use that to get us to the town meeting.
David, do you want to speak?
Yeah, so in order we're not talking about moving the location, so the A zone, that's not a factor at all.
Well, you did. And
We did in the beginning. You keep going to the past. Forget about the past. There might have been some mistakes made that
You
put
can
us...
certainly understand. It's 2.5 years down the road.
Understand.
And, you know, I explained this. This was all explained before, and it was neglected, and it was just...
It was 2.5
ignored.
years ago, but a lot of that time was spent on focusing on a new building, which the consultants back then told us that we had to do. So we found the need
The consultant that
to
didn't
change.
have any elevations, he had nothing.
Exactly,
All right,
but that's in the past.
Waste of money. All right, thank you.
So you have what you need going to go forward? The two articles, we'll keep them in here. Do you want me to modify the wording?
What David has just said is exactly what is going to be said around town, and that has to get around town, that it's going to be for the renovation and up to code. Up to code's going to be expensive.
Let me do this. I will take that construction comment, send it to bond counsel, and say, does it hurt us in any way if we take it out? Yeah, okay,
Yes,
all right,
thank you.
great.
And why don't we talk to the building inspector and see what number we have to reach to comply with complete code? I'll ask for myself. I don't have a problem talking to the building inspector.
Great.
All right. Thank you for your time.
Dave, John,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thanks, John.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, so that's the audit report. I'm done with that. Okay, chief's update on the ambulance.
As well as Chief, while you're up, could you speak to the SAFE grant as well? Thank you.
Yeah, I think it is.
Sorry.
Oh, I was just saying, what I said.
So, if I may, I'm going to start with informing you that, once again, we received just under $5,000 in safe education money from the state.
Congrats.
Thank you. The SAFE program, the Student Awareness for Fire Education, it's a two-part program. Part of it is for elementary school children, and the other part is for senior citizens. This past year is the first year in quite a few years that Nahant has applied for and received the grant. Frank Papalardo has done an outstanding job of bringing programs to the schools and to the senior center. He held a very well-attended educational program at the community breakfast at the church. With this funds, we've also purchased approximately 50 carbon monoxide detectors that we're going to be handing out to residents of the community, senior residents of the community that need them to be compliant in their homes with the carbon monoxide laws. So that's with last year's funds. We put together and continue to develop a program for this year's funds, which will include continued public education and possibly other purchases that serve the community. So I just wanted to make you aware of that funding that's come available to us.
Congratulations.
Thank you. As for the ambulance, as you are aware, during the flooding, during the storm that we had, the ambulance was brought a patient to the hospital. On returning from the hospital to town, the decision was made by the crew to drive into the rotary, which at that point was flooded. They had spoken with the state police and I believe DCR representatives. They drove through. As they came through and almost made it onto the causeway, the ambulance died, stopped functioning where it was. It was towed from the scene by G&J. They did emergency repairs. They were able to replace the air filter, clean that all out, get it going again. They had it back to us by 5:30 that afternoon. Over the course of the next several days, it was noticed that it was not running the way it should be, that there was a white exhaust coming out. It was taken out of service, and it's currently at Minuteman Ford. In speaking with them yesterday morning, they've found several problems, but in order to fully understand the damage, they need to take the entire motor apart. I spoke with them at 4 o'clock this afternoon to try and have an update for you, and as of 4 o'clock this afternoon, they had not gotten it back into a bay to complete that operation. So at this point, we do not know the full extent of the damage.
Well, it's got bent connecting rods. You know what a connecting rod is, right?
I have a basic understanding of that. I'm not a mechanic. I know that there are 2 bent rods, and they believe that there may be further damage.
Yeah, so it needs an engine. Insurance?
We will see. We've made a claim. We're also looking into how the decision was made, and we'll report back on that as well.
Diesel with bent connecting rods, it needs an engine. The sleeve, I mean, this is what I do every day, so.
And so the assessment is forthcoming. As soon as we do have that information, we'll pass it along. We'll bring it back to another discussion here.
That's too bad.
It is too bad.
I do want to thank Atlantic Ambulance for loaning us a vehicle, as they tend to do when we have mechanical issues with ours,
Yeah.
as they have in the past. And
So we
they've
had
been
their ambulance on site?
Yes.
Oh, good, all right.
We are operating out of one of their vehicles.
They loaned us a vehicle?
Yes.
I would assume that it's
Could you
insurable.
send them a letter from us thanking them, please? Sure. I'll be Richie.
Yeah.
But seriously,
Yeah.
that's very nice of them to do that.
Yeah, we have a mutual aid understanding. It's not a technical mutual aid, but it works the same way.
Good.
Thank you, thank you.
I would think it would be insurable. It's just a shame that it happened, and I can understand. I know that the firemen that were pretty upset that the state told them they could go through, and it just ingested water, and that was the end of it. So,
I can tell you that Maya did call me yesterday.
yeah,
They will be going to Minuteman Ford to take a
Yeah.
look at the ambulance and then go further with the case.
how many miles are on it?
I'd have to look. It's probably approximately 5,000 or 6,000.
Yeah.
Tell me you want an engine. Period. That's the the insurance company. I wouldn't even fool around with that. You want the thing running right.
Absolutely.
All right. Okay.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Congratulations on the 5K. Yeah. Tell Frank thank you from us.
I certainly will.
Please. Okay, Town Administrator's report. So we get the annual audit done, Jeff.
Yep, exactly. And so at this point, what I'd like to do is walk you through, and I'll try to be as brief as possible, summaries of the warrant and the budget. We're about 3 weeks behind on the schedule, and what I'd like to do, if I could, is to get your thoughts on some of these high-level issues and use those thoughts and recommendations to incorporate them into this next round that will then go to a set of meetings that occur next week. Wednesday, we're scheduled to meet with the large department heads who will be giving presentations on their budgets to you. And then Thursday, we will be meeting with the Finance Committee to go over the higher level detail. So at this point, if you can indulge me, I'd like to walk you through the warrant. And as we talked about last time, the warrant is really just the kitchen sink. If we heard of something that wanted to be in the warrant, we threw it in here. So if you look at the capital plan now, the capital plan has in there specific funding. There are about 6 articles here in the warrant that contain funding requests for capital. The way we are funding the capital now, we're funding it out of the general fund. So these articles won't be necessary. So we can cross 6 of the articles off right off the bat. But looking at the others that are here, I guess I'd like to kind of walk you through them and just, again, get your thoughts on it. So the first one is Article 8. And that's on the first page, and that's a bylaw amendment for the stretch code. We will strive to get the proper wording on that. Enzo, you had...
Yeah, we'll get that.
Yep, exactly. And I'll be working with Diane on this as well, just to make sure that it is where it should be. If you go to Article 9 and Article 10, which is on the second page, these are 2 amendments that we have been discussing. Obviously, one has to do with regulating marijuana, and the second one has to do with the noise ordinance, which specifically deals with the fact that we don't have time limitations and day limitations on when you can start construction and have to end construction. So this attempts to address that. And I should say at this point that I'm not looking for you to kind of give me deep thoughts on some of these articles. I would like you to tell me whether you like them on the warrant or not this year. And we'll just continue rolling this down the hill. We have about a month before we have to finalize the warrant. So again, we have the Article 8 and 9, marijuana law regulations, and then noise ordinance regulations. Then if you go to the next page, Article 21 and 22, these are regulations that have to do with sprinkler systems. And this is brought up by the fire department as, these are code issues that are advisable for us to take a look at. If you're comfortable, we'll go ahead and roll those forward, and we can get greater reports and detail on this through the fire department. And then by the time we finalize the warrant, they can either stay on or come off.
So that would be, I think it's a great idea that he's doing this, especially for like the Edge Hill and those places.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, I think that's
One would think they'd have it.
long overdue.
One would think, yes.
But you're right. It's better to have it on paper.
But some of these buildings were actually just, they converted and converted and converted, and pretty soon they ended up with something they weren't never intended for.
Yeah, okay.
Yep. The next one is Article 23, which is a Special Injury Leave Indemnity Fund, and this is something that is requested that we consider as part of our Maya insurance and state legislation. So I'll give you more detail on that, and we can decide whether we want to keep that on there. Right. Then going to the next page, Article 32 and 33 are the 2 fire station articles. So we'll roll those forward. Article 36, now this has to do with funding for 2 large projects that we're undertaking. The Willow Road revetment that's right there by Kelly Greens next to Ocean View. That is in need of repair. So we have actually a FEMA grant on that. And so we are working to keep that active, and there's a matching on it. So this will provide the matching.
That's Article 36?
36, yep. And then Article 37 is the big one. That's the sewer budget or borrowings. And so right now, that's a mobile number. We'll be taking a look at the capital plan. Dennis and Dan will give us another report before we finalize the warrant, and we can determine if any of it needs to move or if we're comfortable with the approximately $4 million cost. So those are the highlight issues of the warrant. The rest of it is really cookie cutter stuff that keeps coming back year after year. Mm-hmm. And it's the business of the town that has to be taken care of and the votes that are needed by the people. So those items, I'll go ahead and regenerate them. As we get into the capital plan, if you are comfortable with that, I'll take off the articles that are associated with the capital plan that are no longer necessary. Okay, great. You bet. Now moving to the budget. Let me give John. I sent that copy to you, John, but yeah, just so we have a hard copy with you. So taking a look at the budget, we, again, are about 3 weeks behind. Deb and I are, the town accountant and I are striving to pull together and shuffle the numbers together in a way that we can get it in front of the FinCom and the Board of Selectmen. Looking at it from a very high level, the budget approach is similar to what it was last year. We requested level funding. However, this year, this is the third year of level funding, so we're starting to see some unique stresses that I'm going to recommend that we address some of the stresses, but where we can avoid it and we can stay at level funding, I'm going to continue to request that. So as we go at one of the next meetings, when we go through the itemization, you'll see where we have some that I'm just going to identify. We need to address that stress. Looking at the salary increases, union negotiations are ongoing. They're going slowly, and I don't anticipate we're going to have a contract for the upcoming town meeting. Okay. But what I've done is placed into the budget a 1% increase on all salary components. So that's a theme that you'll see through the budget itself.
Okay. So that's for all the unions and COLA for the town hall staff?
Correct. All union and non-union. What will happen is that the union, they actually don't receive their increase until they have a contract in hand. The non-union will receive the increase.
What about the department heads and?
Most of their contracts specify that they rise at the same level as all others. So if there's a 1% given to union and non-union, they receive 1%. Okay. We only have one contract, it's a fire chief, that is still specifying a different number. Okay. And that's the last year for that.
That's in the contract.
Exactly. Now, the capital plan we'll go over separately, but as we get into the second page of this summary, there's some capital elements in there that really call out the highlights. So let's continue down the line. Looking at the budget assumptions, if you look at the back page of this attachment, you'll see that these are our general budget assumptions that we use from year to year. As we've talked about, at this point in the fiscal cycle, a lot of the cost estimates that we're seeking aren't known and won't be known until about April, May, maybe even June.
Sometimes June, yeah.
So what we do is we have to do an educated guess. And these assumptions are pretty consistent from year to year. For instance, if you go down to appropriations on the bottom and you look at health insurance, we're carrying a 10% increase from year to year. When we get into it and we get closer to the end of the budget where we have to finalize it for print, we'll have the real number, and then we'll adjust it back. So these are the standard assumptions. There's nothing really different here.
And this, last year being my first year, we had to do this too.
Yes.
Because it comes in so late.
Exactly.
Okay.
And, we're very conservative on assumptions because what we'd hate to do is find ourselves with not enough funding in the budget.
Yeah, to go lower.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So the other thing under budget overview is free cash. So we have established what I continue to call an austerity program, but it's really a financial discipline plan. And what I did with the free cash this year is I funded the majority of it. So you'll see that free cash reserves, or an unused set aside, that means it's just sitting in our books and it's not used for any purpose, will be at $350,000. That was the entire goal set for the 5 years. We have the stabilization fund contribution at $50,000, OPEB contribution at $25,000, and then the capital plan funding, I'm setting the floor right now at $400,000. However, that can go higher. And at this point, that uses $825,000 worth of free cash and leaves us a little more free cash that, again, if we need to apply it to capital or offsetting the other portions of the budget, we have that available. Now, looking at the budgets themselves, again, these are very high level, and I just wanted to pull out the big issues and get your thoughts on it right now. Looking at data processing, we still have the ongoing transition of the Treasurer Collector's Office. So we placed $15,000 in there as a means of assisting in cost offset for possible training, automations, new technology, et cetera. And that's an item that we can continue to track and determine what we want to do with that. All of these are in that same category. The police department has come forward with the funding request for the 12th officer. At this point, I'm not recommending it. I think that we have a lot of costs in front of us, and I know the need is there. I very much support the 12th officer, but it's a matter of timing. And I've spoken with the chief about this, so it's my recommendation at this point, which then gets into a discussion with the three of you as to how we want to move it forward. So your recommendation could be that we do fund it. So just so you understand what we're doing.
Yeah, and we'll know better after we discuss it with them. Okay.
Yep. So the 12th officer is a request. Again, I have not put that into the budget that you've seen. We also have one retirement that's anticipated, so we funded $18,000 for the buyout of that position. You'll see if you go back to the assumptions that we have an assumption for a 3% increase on retirement. But that is just for the general risk associated with retirement. The known ones we go ahead and fund out of the budget. So there's an $18,000 funding in the police department. We also have ongoing fleet problems, and so there are 2 cruisers in the capital plan at this point for the police department. And that sums up the police department moving to fire.
How are they going to fund the police cars?
Most of the vehicles and fleets are funded through general fund.
I don't want to borrow.
Yeah, exactly. No, we would only borrow if there's a large enough sum. You know, like for instance, if you get some of the larger DPW trucks or fire vehicles.
We need to get, I want a copy of what years his vehicles are. I mean, one car I think is going to be sufficient.
We have a fleet schedule that shows all the fleet, and so I'll provide that for you.
Please. What's the fingerprint machine? Why do we need one of them?
They have a fingerprint machine now that is failing, and so it's just standard equipment for their operation.
Okay.
Yep. And so provide. Okay. Looking at fire department, capital is the big issue there. We've talked about the new station. We also have the new truck coming in. The truck has a matching component to it that we have funded in the budget itself. So fire, I mean, that's really the big driving element there. School department has an overall increase of 4%, and then they have a capital item of $75,000 for the replacement of the roof over the gym.
Do they have anyone who looked at that gave an estimate?
They did. So they've been making some repairs, and they made some significant repairs to stabilize it for now because they were having some troubles before. But the people who have come in to give estimates have said it's on its last leg. And so we can possibly get another year or 2 years out of it, so the funding is something that is recommended.
It's a rubber roof, I think.
It is a rubber roof, yeah.
On that, do we, under that, because it's capital, do we have a say on that $75,000 roof?
We do, but it becomes one of those exercises of is it prudent to take further risk? You know, because if something fails, you end up with the emergency costs. So.
Oh, understood.
Yeah.
I was over there for a few years that they had a flat roof and it kept leaking.
Yeah. Did you see
year after year after year they'd put more tar on it.
Did you see the new floor?
In the gym floor?
In the gym.
Oh,
yeah.
no, not yet.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Oh, beautiful. I'll go over.
Beautiful, yeah.
No, I was just wondering because I'd like to support this, but we have to. Will we come out and like support it openly?
Yeah. So when we have the capital plan, we'll walk through all this. That's in there, and so it's viewed as our debt. And so you, the selectmen, will be bringing forward a recommendation. Yeah,
okay.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
There's one other thing I'd like to try to add to that, the capital, and that, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, the LED lights. They're around 70,000.
Yeah.
If we can add that to their budget somehow.
I know Diane was talking about.
And I can tell you, the $70,000 LED lights that will go into the school, first of all, is going to save us a lot of electricity financially. And our initial grant from the state, once we get into the green communities, the designation will be $129,000, which would be reimbursable. So we could reimburse ourselves.
Yeah.
The $70,000.
Good idea.
And it's a good idea because as it stands now, I think their system is failing with the heat. You know, how the computers turn the heat, the lights on and stuff. I know that they had a system in there before, and I know that Tony's been mentioning that, but I think it's a good idea because LEDs burn hardly anything. So I think it's moving forward. Diane, and by the way, Diane Monteith's doing a great job as the chairman of that committee.
She is, yeah. And Diane and I have been talking about this, and I support this, because I agree the money is well spent, because
Yeah.
you just earn it back. However, it's really the timing of when we do it so that it hits the grant right. So
Right.
if we put in the budget, it gives us that flexibility.
Okay.
We'll be eligible for the grant in October.
Okay, so we should put it in.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think so.
And it's all contingent upon.
We'll
the-
talk to Tony. Tony's, I mean, he's the plant manager
And
over
the-
there.
It's all contingent upon this article, stretch code, because we have to become adopt the stretch code.
I don't see that failing. I really don't.
Either, yeah.
No, I don't either. But you never know.
Yes, you never know.
Well, me and Nicole Gogan will have to do a good job of presenting it. We'll use her instead of me.
That's a good idea.
All right.
So that's with the school, and I'll go ahead and add in the lighting. The Public Works Department, what you'll see is Dennis, the DPW director, put in a lot of requests for increases, and I've slashed him. And I'm not being cruel, it's just that he's looking at it from the perspective, he looks at his history of spending, and when we look at the fact that we're investing so heavily in infrastructure, that a lot of his costs will change. So what I've told him is that let's pare back your requested expenditures until we better understand what these investments will change, how they'll change your world. And he's agreed. And he's got enough on his plate now to deal with all those improvements through the infrastructure. So generally, you'll see that there's a lot of cuts from what he's requested when you get into that, and we'll talk through that.
What about their, he's looking for, okay, so he's looking
Yeah.
for 3 trucks.
He's looking for 3 trucks, exactly, and he's also looking to fund the 6th position. I'm not recommending that we fund the 6th position, just because we have so much going on right now and the costs, and that what I would suggest is that the 5 people that we that we have are skilled laborers, and that we free them up from mundane tasks like lawn mowing, to work on the infrastructure improvements that they can contribute to, and that we actually add $25,000 into the budget for a contracted lawn mowing service to take over for a year to 2 years. So,
We can talk about that.
yeah,
but,
that's something to talk about.
The 3 trucks, I'm in favor, because they haven't gotten trucks for a couple of years, and I just see what they're,
Yeah.
they're pretty well beat up, so.
Yeah, you look at the cost-benefit analysis of 3 trucks, and we definitely need them.
And I think they overdid it with the 2 big internationals.
Agreed.
But they have them, they're beautiful, and they work good, and they'll be there for another 20 years, so.
They look good on the Christmas parade.
Yeah. No, they're workhorses, so they're
No,
a
they are.
good piece of equipment.
Did they have to go out and get a loan or a lease plow?
Yes, we have been, everything's been failing around Dennis.
Right.
The poor guy. So he's actually been leasing equipment as he needs it to stay ahead of the issues.
Oh, they did a great job. I woke up today to more ice than I wanted to, and they were out there doing a great job.
I have talked to him a little bit about the salt. It's a little white out there for me, but, yeah, exactly.
The staffing, I'm still in favor of it, of adding a position, but again, we'll wait till after the meeting.
So we can continue to talk about that. Then the last item is snow and ice. We have funded it, we increased the funding by $10,000 last year. I'm going to propose we increase it again by another $10,000, because we continually overspend that budget, which
Yes.
we're allowed to do. But it's to the point where it's obscene.
But
And
then you have
so-
to make up for it the next
Exactly.
year.
So you're always robbing yourself to pay it. So we might as well just do it up front. And,
People don't realize the importance of salt, period,
oh, yeah.
until they hit black ice.
Yeah. No, it's amazing the cost of it, but also how important it is. So that's an overview.
Excuse me, you just gave me a great thing, robbing it forward. That's what we do with snow and ice. That's it, right on.
It's so true.
When you sent us the email that we were already done, that was before
It's so true. Yeah.
two other times.
On any of this, any comments, anything that really strikes you? 'Cause if not, I'll roll it all forward and put it into the package. But if there's anything that you'd like to see modified at this point? No?
No, I think we need to start somewhere, and then.
Yep.
just
No, this
pick it
is a
apart.
very good start.
Yep. Okay, great.
I know the FinCom wants to get rolling too, so.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's tick-tock, tick-tock. So looking at the next element, which is a part of this in the revenues, is the fee schedule. So what you see here is a fee schedule that you've had for the last 3 packets, and all it does is try to keep us current with recommendations from the department head, or as we do comparables with other communities. And there are small adjustments that are throughout, and if you look to the far right-hand column, they're highlighted as to where those adjustments occur. As you can see, there are not a lot of them. And so what I would like is, because the fees were supposedly to have been in place starting the 8th. Yeah, exactly. So if I can get a vote on these, that'd be great, and we'll just roll those forward and use those as part of our revenue projections.
I move the Board of Selectmen vote to approve the attached fee schedule for effective 1/1/18.
I will second that motion for discussion. So, you went up for the food service establishment
Inspections, yeah.
fees, okay. Refrigerator, tobacco, mooring. They used to be 25, now they're 50. So that some of them doubled, but
But you look at the scale, you know, you're talking 25 versus, you know.
okay. It was
like a
okay with all the
250.
department heads. They were okay with this, right?
Yep.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries.
Great, thank you. The next item is the classification study, and we had very minor modifications to that. And if you look at it on the second page, I don't know if your copies show it, but we have a change to the assistant librarian and the sailing supervisor. Big ticket items here. And so what we've done is the positions are currently at the top of their range, and so the range used to be 11 to 1450 on each, or up to 1450 on the sailing supervisor. It's now up to $16. It doesn't mean that everybody jumps up with the range. It just means that you have the capacity if it's increased by a COLA or some other factor.
I move the Board of Selectmen vote to approve the attached classification schedule for FY19.
I'll second that. For discussion.
It's just those 2 items that were modified.
Right, and the rest of them are contractual.
Yeah, everything else is as it was, and everybody's comfortably within their ranges. So,
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
now the big issue is the capital plan. Again, you've seen this before. There's been very few modifications. You can see that the green columns in the first 2 green columns, the first one is the general fund appropriation, so that's where we use free cash to pay for something. And then you also have the borrowing section, which is where obviously we go long-term, use bans or borrowing. So the majority of our vehicle fleets and some equipment are within the general fund and are being paid for by the use of the $400,000 that we talked about in the free cash use earlier. And I went over the highlights. So DPW has 3 trucks and numerous sets of equipment. Police has 2 vehicles. The fire station, the fire department will have the new truck, and all we're doing is paying off our matching for the grant. When you get on the second page, the bottom of the first page and the most of the second page, that's where you see your big numbers for your water and sewer infrastructure emergency spending. You're looking at about $4+ million in this first round. Ultimately, if we were to do nuts to bolts in the entire system, you're looking at about $28 million. Yeah, but this was the presentation that Dan Coughlin gave to the board earlier,
Yeah.
and he did a great job.
Yes, you did.
And so the Dennis and Dan worked to cull out those elements that had to be done now, and that's what this represents. And again, it's a big amount. But if you're comfortable with what we're seeing here for numbers, what Deb will do now is roll this into a debt schedule, and we can start to look at the overall costs and how they'll hit our budgets.
Yes.
Okay.
I am.
Yep. And, you know, in a quick nutshell, that's the budget that I needed your input on. You know, I wanted to make you aware of what was happening in some of these more unusual things that happen from year to year. So now that you understand that, Deb and I will work like fools tomorrow and Monday to put out a product, get it in your hands by Tuesday morning, and I know Deb is probably going to speed dial me here in a second, and try to get in your hands by Tuesday morning, and then we'll meet on Wednesday and Thursday, and that starts the process.
Right. Okay.
So we appreciate your patience.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
That's it for me, and then town hall office hours?
I think we're going to wait on that until we have a full board.
Yes.
That's, you know, we'll let you get back.
Last item is the tobacco licenses. We have 3 that we annually approve.
I move that the Board of Selectmen vote to approve the tobacco licenses for 2019 for Nahant Market, Richland, and Seaside Variety.
I'll second for discussion. Discussion?
No.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries.
And then finally, if you go down to 5, the town clerk has asked me to just have you sign the warrant for the special state primary.
Yeah.
And she wanted me to talk about it just so that she can get into the minutes. So all I'm going to do is say, you're going to be signing this tonight. You don't have to take a vote. And that authorizes the warrant for the special state primary. And we'll put that all in the minutes.
Yeah. And we noticed that in the paper that Nahant's going to get a big chunk of money for that
Yes.
election. $730 from
Have
the
to figure
state.
out where to spend
How
it.
generous. We possibly have a running person that's running for state rep here. Maybe we can get more next time. If he wins.
We'll keep him close. And I think that's all we have for the agenda today.
Okay, so you want to give that to us to sign?
Yeah, I've got a whole bunch of things I need you to sign.
Okay, so it's a lot. All right. And we also have the lobster trap.
No, you dealt with that last time. For some reason, that's got stuck in there. So,
Oh, okay.
yeah,
All right.
you've already authorized that.
Yes, we did.
Yes, you did.
Okay.
You did a good job, too.
I think that's pretty much it. Can we, I'd like to get, the next meeting, I'd like to see the Coast Guard Housing Committee come.
Yeah, they've confirmed that they'll be here at the next meeting.
Okay, good. I'd like to hear from them, to see what's going on with that.
And that will be February
First?
1st?
Our next meeting is February 1st?
Yep.
Okay. I had asked for some time in February. That's good.
We are having one next week, though.
Yes, we have the Wednesday, which is the 24th, and Thursday, the 25th. Wednesday is at 6 o'clock. That's just us and the large department heads.
Right.
And then there's a joint finance and board of selectmen meeting on the Thursday at 7:30.
Okay.
Right.
And we don't have it televised at this point. Do you want it televised? Yeah, I mean, it becomes a
It
rather...
doesn't have to, but, you know, it'd be nice if people would come up and watch it. Might get them out of the house, you know?
Yeah. It gets a little boring talking about the details, so I don't know if it would hurt our...
I don't have, I mean, if you want to televise it, that's fine by me.
Okay. Let me see if our videographer is available.
Okay.
Great.
Anything else?
Nope.
Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay. We are adjourned.
Thank you, John.